Welcome back to askreddit Discover channel.
Doctors of Reddit, what's the creepiest thing you've encountered while on the job? Saw a lady once who had gotten high on something and chewed off her lips. That's pretty fucking high. All of these are just making me sad. What does that person do when they come down off of being high and realize that they're horribly disfigured forever? How would a person even deal with that? Medical student. While on my psych rotation, came across an individual who was a chemistry graduate student. Apparently he had been taking astronomical amounts of ketamine, and he was just continuously disassociated. For the entire time I was on this portion of the rotation, 3 weeks, I never heard him speak a word. 95% of the time we was wrapped up in his sheets like a mummy, and he would just periodically laugh, a crazy soft chuckle, from under his covers, if you tried to talk to him. The creepiest laugh I've ever heard. I'll never forget that. Ochum does that to some people. One day you're reading through flashcards, the next you're wrapped in a blanket absolutely tickled by how it feels on your eyelids, and it makes you giggle like a necromancer. Does that do permanent damage then? Or was he still somehow under the effects? I obviously don't know a lot about drugs, so forgive me if this is a stupid question. I work as a psychotherapist in a hospital system. My definition of creepy is probably quite a bit different from other medical professionals. The one that got to me the most was a patient who came to us after attempting suicide by sawing both his arms off at the forearm with a table saw. His arms were reattached, fairly successfully too, with only limited impairments in mobility. All I could think was how bad it would have to be to live in his head that sawing his arms off seemed better than that. He has since completed suicide. Edit. A table saw is a saw mounted in a table that stays on once turned on. All you have to do is run things into the saw to cut them. This is how he could cut both arms off. Also, suffice it to say that if you are in a state of mind that finds cutting your arms off to kill yourself or to relieve psychological pain, you are not in the state of mind to determine the most efficient way to kill yourself. Completed suicide seems like an appropriate statement. My mom has tried to commit suicide twice. I assume she will eventually complete it once she gets up the courage. They're a really weird way to try to kill yourself. I know from experience that depression does weird things to you, but I've always wanted to do it quickly and painlessly when I was that way. When I was on a rotation during med school, we got a call about a 23-year-old woman who was shot in the head and who was already completely gone, but was reportedly 5 months pregnant, so they were doing CPR until they got her to the hospital to see if the baby was viable. They got her to the ER and did an ultrasound, and turned about baby was full term, and they did a C-section in like under a minute and got the baby out. I don't think it's so incredibly uncommon, but it was pretty surreal to see a baby delivered from a dead person with their brain exposed, and she was pretty close to the same age I was at the time. Baby prematurely delivered after crash that killed mother. The pregnant mother, who was tragically killed after a 15-year-old crashed a stolen car into her vehicle at 120 km/h, as doctors miraculously deliver her baby. Only just happened the other day in Hobart, Australia. Nice work, medical team. Obviously the mother's death was tragic, but that we have the capabilities, like that, to pull something from the wreckage is amazing. Was the baby okay? I was having a part signing her admissions paperwork. Everything was going normally, and she seemed coherent, until she looked out her window and asked me, "Did you see that?" I hadn't seen anything, and she said, "A man just jumped off the building." Then she shook her head and mumbled to herself how her mind isn't right anymore. Freaked me the fuck out. Now I'm terrified of getting old and having dementia. A woman at the nursing home I worked at had macular degeneration and would think she saw little men on people's heads or doing a jig on the windowsill or something. I had to explain to her that our brains like to make stuff up when our eyes are going, and the little men weren't real. Luckily she was still pretty sharp, even at 90 plus, so she understood, but she seemed a little sad. This is the scariest one to me. Just the fact that the brain can see something happen, all the while remaining lucid enough to know that that event wasn't real, makes me want to never get old. A nurse here was doing CPR on a lady whose heart had stopped. They initially rolled her into the room unconscious and not breathing. This lady is pretty much dead. However, in the middle of doing chest compressions, her hands reach up and grasp my wrists and then fall back to hanging off the table. We never got her back. Nope. Hands down the creepiest one here. My mother was a NICU nurse for 30 years, and one time she showed me a picture of a baby maybe a centimeters or two smaller than a dollar bill placed next to it. She told me it didn't survive too much longer. That job wrecked her. I remember her coming home some nights and just pouring wine immediately. I'm also never going to forget when she told me with tears in her eyes, if you are very unlucky you will lose a child in your life. I lose one every month. Hug your mom for me. My son was in the NICU for 99 days. He's great now, but those nurses, man, they're angels and scrubs. I have the deepest respect for NICU nurses. My mom is a hematology/oncology nurse and she used to work on the floor of the hospital, where essentially cancer patients went to die. I remember her wanting to move into gynecological/obstetrics care, because the dying every day really wrecked her. My mom has a lot of issues, but she is one of the bravest, most compassionate people I've ever met. Our moms are great people, that's it, and deal with some of the worst parts of people's lives. We have good moms, even if they always don't seem like that.